All right, what's going on? Hey, Mike, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm excellent. Good to be here. Glad to chat with you.
Good, man. I'm excited to chat with you too and hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
I've been checking out swipe.co. I love the website and it's so helpful, man. It's super helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. It's good to
Yeah,
hear.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I guess kind of to get rolling on this, like, how did you initially kind of get into copywriting?
Yeah. So I was into design first and creating logos, creating websites. And I was always designing stuff when I was younger. But what happened was, as I was building websites for people, I found myself, because I liked writing and I liked sales, I found myself naturally just writing the copy on the site, but I didn't know what copywriting was. I was just thinking when I'm working with a client, I'm not just gonna like I want to get results for them. I'm not just going to create a template and send it to them. I want it to because it's fulfilling for me as well. So I wanted to look at it from a big picture perspective. And then eventually one of my clients goes, you know that what you're advertising like as web design, this isn't web design. Like
Mhm.
this is more than that and you should start charging for it and really bringing forth this idea of copywriting, which I had heard before, but I just hadn't looked at it in that way. It was just more me trying to create the most optimal results, which I think started with conversion optimization and then branched more into copywriting. And I always loved writing. So it just became kind of a natural fit. And from there, I dove more into it. And I used my skills from the web design, from the web development to create the site. Like I created that. So it's cool how things interweave,
Yeah,
all the, yeah.
that's cool, man. And so did you study kind of design in school and start doing that while you're in school, or like how long ago did you start this?
Yeah, well, I was into creating, I'd say like brand identities, and I would create flyers in college. And I like the marketing and the business aspect of it, where what you're creating really stands for and represents something and has a reaction. Like when I would create a logo for someone and put it on a business card, and I see how happy they are and how much it, even just for the business owner or just for the person, it juices them up so much. So I really liked that. And yeah, from there, I felt more into like it's kind of like I got good at the design stuff. And yeah, I was looking at courses, I was looking into books and stuff. And then it's kind of like with a lot of things in my life where once I get it down a little bit, it starts to shift to something else, where that's just how I am, like where I'm curious. I like to look into different things. I don't force it, but another thing will come up. I'm like, all right, let me check this out now. And then I deep dive, like I'll immerse myself and then that'll even out. And it's kind of like building all these skill sets in very immersive periods of time where just soaking everything up and then, slowly building after that.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like perfectly suited for copywriting whenever you're doing all
Yeah.
this research and really diving in, finding out about things. That's one of the things I really enjoy about it is I get to learn so much just working with kind of different clients and different spaces and stuff that I normally wouldn't research normally on my own. And then I really just dive deep. And I think I read something, it was like on Facebook or some kind of social media post today or yesterday. And this guy, he was like, he found out that he had some sort of like medical condition from studying a client's thing. Like he didn't even know he had it. And then like, he was like, shoot, that sounds like me, And like, he like researched it and he was like, oh crap. And so it's interesting stuff. It's helpful.
Yeah, it is. I love that too. Like I don't work with clients directly anymore just because I put so much focus on the site. But that was one of my favorite things is because some people they focus on one particular niche, and that's cool because I understand you get really good at it. You want to provide more results, but I definitely liked the variety of working with all different people
Mm-hmm.
to learn about all these different topics and these different industries that help you in your personal life, like you
Definitely.
mentioned.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's cool stuff, man. So
yeah.
yeah, going back to the website, like how did that come about originally? How did you end up starting swipe.co?
Yeah, so this again kind of bridged from the design world where I was used to going on sites for design that were inspiration sites.
Hmm.
So there were a ton, and still are, a ton of inspiration sites for web design, but none of these sites, none of them ever focused on sales, on marketing, on copywriting. And it kind of shocked me. So I took that same concept and I applied it to the idea of the swipe file for copywriting, for marketing. And once I had that idea, it was maybe like a year of me building up to it and feeling like I can create it. And then from there, it was just like, oh my God, there was so much juice, so much energy to the creation of it, because I wanted to create it so bad that I put everything into it again in like this short period of time. And then I kind of stepped back, treated it as a side project, still worked with clients. And eventually I'm like, all right, this has a ton of potential because of all the attention it was getting. So I'm going to do this full time, basically.
That's very cool, man. And so, how did you end up kind of like finding all these samples? I guess just like, did you have your own like swipe file already kind of to get started with, or like what happened with?
Yeah, hold on one second. Yeah, I had my own swipe file that I had on my computer. Like I was already taking screenshots of stuff. I was saving stuff. But and what I've realized from working on the site, but also from my past, I really like research. I really like research, and I'm good at it. And I think what makes a good researcher, first and foremost, is that you're super curious and you want to find an answer for something. So once I am excited about something, I often will research like deep into it. And that's what I kind of did with this on steroids. So I got subscriptions to newspaper archive sites. I got a library card so I could look into their database of the old stuff. And then, of course, keeping track of newer stuff. But it's interesting how I kind of dived deep into the older stuff at first because I felt like I wanted to understand the history more and get a clear idea of what has come before, because then I know that there's always going to be new stuff, always going to be new. Mm-hmm. And that really helped me in a huge way, because you start to see patterns. You start to see how things repeat, and that just because something is from the year 1907 doesn't mean that it's not being used today. And some people can have a hard time looking at that older ad and saying, well, that's not applicable today. Look at the words that they use and the salutations. And it's like, yeah, but it's not about, like, look at how they're using certain psychology that still applies today. Mm-hmm. You know, certain things like Claude Hopkins coming up with a trial, like that is used so much today. And if you just look at the beginnings of it, it kind of takes away the shiny object syndrome, I guess you could say, of like gurus telling you this new method, this new that. And when you look at consistency of how things have been, that's when you see like the foundational stuff. And I think it keeps you grounded. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Going back to Claude Hopkins, I just read My Life in Advertising. It's a book that I always kind of just passed up on the shelf. Like I read like scientific advertising and it was great. Yeah. And I was just like, well, it's just maybe like his memoir or something like that. But like it's blown me away, man. I love like hearing these stories about how he came up with all these things, like the trials and all these other things that we kind of take for granted now as everyday as marketers now. Like this guy has been doing it since the early 1900s. You know, it's craziness.
Yeah, dude, his stories are wild. Like he and Lord and Thomas, his agency, they pretty much made brushing your teeth popular.
Yeah,
with Pepsodent. That people weren't brushing their teeth back in the day as much. And they created this idea of an invisible film that is over your teeth. They even had a test for people to try it. Place your tongue over your teeth. Do you feel that invisible film? It was bullshit. It was bullshit. Like your teeth are going to feel smooth. But it was perfect because it created this awareness of the problem. And now every time people think of the film on your teeth or they put their tongue over their teeth, like, I got to solve this. And it was a very positive thing that ended up happening.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love that, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I guess on another note, so before our call today, you sent over some really rad email swipes to me
Oh, yeah.
and to check out, and I dug into them a little bit, and I can't wait to kind of go a little further into them. But going back to you doing like email copywriting stuff, like what was like one of the biggest shifts that you found in writing emails that kind of like took your emails to the next level, and that maybe you've seen in other swipes that you picked up? Like, what are some of the big things you see there?
Yeah, I think a big shift for me on a grand scale, on a bigger level, is, and I know this could seem simple, but it's actually seeing your subscribers as real people and then relating to them from a place like you have a friendship with them, and then stepping into their shoes. And I feel like this is the foundation of whenever I write that I feel is the most powerful. And it's like a visualization and a stepping into the shoes of that person. So once you understand them, once you understand who you're writing for, that you pick that particular person out that you're writing to. And if you're able to really, like, as you're writing, imagine, like, what's their reaction with this? What's their reaction with that? And it just puts you almost in like a meditative state too when you're writing, because you're kind of immersed in this simulation of you and them, and they're having a reaction to what you're writing. And that's how I started writing. And it made a huge difference, because a lot of people, they think of their subscribers or whoever as an email list, and an email list doesn't have a personality. It doesn't have a name. It's just subscribers. It's just people on a list. So switching to that feeling of actually talking to a specific person, and then doing it in a way where you're using what you're learning about them and copywriting principles and psychology and stuff. It's like, how would they feel? Like, one thing that I'll often ask, because I like to write in a way that's very exciting, where people will see it and be like, oh my God, I need to know about this. Like, this sounds so cool. And so I will even do it with myself too, like, because when we're in the writing mode, it's hard to be outside of it, like kind of subjective to it, right? So sometimes I'll look at, and it's so good to step away from, I'm sure you've
Oh yeah.
experienced this too, right? Where you write it, then you step away and you come back, because I'll read it again and I'm like, this isn't as exciting as I thought. Like,
It's a different feeling altogether.
Yeah, but it's I think all of this kind of I mean, there's a lot of points here, but one thing that I'm thinking about is it kind of comes back to imagining and really feeling the emotional response that you're going to create, and being honest with yourself. So if you come back and you're like, nah, that doesn't feel as good, that you're honest about that. And you don't just, like many people, just push things aside. You know, I'll go to it later. I'll work with it later. Like, you have to be honest about this. And of course, the response that you get from people, and going based on that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, because like if you're looking at just numbers in a subscribers in an email list, you know, like it can be easy just to think of them as just a big blob, but they all have different beliefs, different you know, wants and needs and everything like that, and you have to like take all that into account for sure, man.
Yeah, and then it comes back to, because I have a pretty wide audience. I mean, there's a lot of different types of people, but then it comes back to who you want as your ideal client. Like, if you want a certain type of person, write to that person. And this is, I think there's mentioned in the Ben Settle report, because he's really, the email report you mentioned, because he's really adamant about this, is he knows exactly who he wants on his list. He doesn't want crybabies. He doesn't want people that are politically correct. So he's completely okay with being polarizing with things, and not caring about what other people say that he doesn't want on his list. And I think that's really liberating.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you want to know who should stay and who needs to go, and let them know inside there, because like you don't want the wrong
Yeah.
people on there that are going to say you're spamming them and all that stuff.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, you can't look at it as a loss. You
Yeah.
have to look at it as like you're leaning out, like you're making it more lean. And I think that feels so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Hoarding, right? You're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to keep them all.
I need as many as I can get. For sure, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, whenever you're writing emails, like what's your favorite way of kind of coming up with content? I know a lot of people do struggle with that whenever they're trying to write more emails. How do you find, what are some things that you find help you do that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, it's funny, I think they don't think their life is interesting enough. And that you're shaking your head like, yep, I know what you're talking about, right? They don't think their life is interesting enough. They don't think they're an interesting person. And so they feel like they don't have anything to write about. And it's so ridiculous because all you have to do is talk to some people and kind of go deep into a conversation, and you realize you have so much in common with other people, and that what you think is weird or that you're only doing, other people are doing. So I think first and foremost, it's actually looking at yourself and your life and saying, I have, even if I don't think I have an interesting life, there's things going on in my life that I can talk about. And honestly, I think that that's when your best stuff comes out, because you're, whether it's being excited about it right now, I would say whatever you're excited about right now is what's going to bring out the best in your copy. And so now then it's a matter of, and this could be another belief is, well, this doesn't have anything to do with what I'm writing about, or this. Yeah, but use your imagination. How can you connect the dots? Like, how can you, because another thing in that bestseller report, and this is like said by other email guys like Matt Fury and Dan Kennedy and stuff, is use stories and entertain, and don't feel like it has to be all education based. So it's okay to start with something that does not seem related, and then you tie it together. So I would say that's, to me, is the most important thing. And then from there, yeah, look at, current events. I feel like if you are a curious person, which I think every copywriter is kind of a curious person and should be, right? It's like we all have a curiosity. So if you're already using that curiosity in your life, why not just grab from that, and then, like I said, current event type of stuff, or any type of stories. There was one report I did, it's called Reverse Engineering Stories That Sell. And part of the report was this idea of using certain searches in Google, like certain phrases where you put a subject, like, for instance, one of my things with my site is I do a lot of reverse engineering stuff. So I put like reverse engineering, and then I would put other words like weird, crazy, insane, and just like really big words, like whatever comes out of it is going to be interesting. And I gave examples of how, like, for instance, one of the things that came up is the idea of reverse engineering UFOs at Area 51. And that's just through searching for like crazy stuff related to a topic. So then I could use that because that's interesting.
I like that, man. That's awesome. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Simple, right? But it's
super simple. Yeah.
Using the power of Google.
Yeah. No, it's awesome, man. Yeah. And going back to like writing stories that like excite you and like energize you, like if you're writing like that, it's probably going to energize your audience too. I was talking to Ian Stanley about that yesterday, and then also about how important like correlations are. Like you said, like you don't have to like write entirely about your subject. You can write an interesting story, something that you think is interesting that energizes you and will probably energize your audience, and then bring that into why they should click and check out whatever you want them to check out, or buy your product or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've read his emails, and I know he does that. Like, he's really good at that.
Yeah, it's a big thing he does. Yeah. It's one of my favorite things to do in emails too. And I think that's, that's one way of doing it. If you're always kind of like struggling to find out what to talk about, just talk about what you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be a more curious person.
Yeah. Be
Like
curious.
Daniel Collins.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, I guess we talked about earlier, like how Ben Settles, he's not afraid to push away the people that shouldn't be in his audience, and like that's probably a good way of looking at it. But what would you say is a good way to build rapport with the people that you do want in? Like what's the best way of kind of like welcoming them in, letting them know that they're in the right place, and then kind of building that relationship that we all strive to build inside of our email lists?
Yeah. Well, I definitely see how kind of what we talked about ties into this, like flows into this, because it's this idea that when you're coming from your own experience and kind of your authentic self, and I think it's so cool that, especially when you're writing from yourself, I feel like you find yourself in a different way, and you kind of like, it actually pushes you to figure out who am I and what am I about. And so it's this idea of being vulnerable with who you are, but also not, and looking at it in a way to what I talked about earlier, where you're seeing them as actual people and learning about them, understanding them. So that way you can relate, you can build rapport by showing the similarities and how you're like this and how you were like them. And so I think the rapport part, it starts with knowing who you're talking to, because otherwise, how are you going to build rapport?
Yeah,
you can just throw stuff out, like in if you're just at a bar or you're just in any place, you could throw something out and then go from there and then say, oh, that's interesting, and then go to something else. But if you want to be good at copywriting, like the ultimate advantage is to know as much as you can before you do the writing. So yeah, that's like the foundation. And then being vulnerable with yourself, so that way people open up and they see your flaws, and then they relate to you. Like I always hear from people, and I've had this in my experience too, where they say their biggest, most responsive emails are the ones where they tell like some kind of sob story in a sense, or something that just is like digging, like showing their soul and like really digging into who they are, because people feel it. It's like, you're saying with Ian, where it rubs off on people. It's almost like you can't look at it as just words. You have to look at it as the state in which you are writing it and where you're coming from. And I just fully believe that it's not about the words. It's about where you're coming from, because that shows. Just like in talking, where people can pick up on these things. Like you don't even have to be super intuitive to feel a certain way about somebody, or to think, or to see if they're aligned with what they're talking about. And you know what I mean? So
definitely, man. No, I like that. That's awesome, man. I appreciate that, dude.
Yes.
That's all I got today, but I really appreciate
Sweet,
you
man.
jumping on today. This has been phenomenal and super helpful.
Cool.
So where should people go to find out more about what you're working on? I know we've got swipe.co. Is that the best place to send them?
Yeah, well, that's where the free archive is, and they can learn a lot from that. And there's a lot in there. I mean, I think there's like over 400 examples. But I also have a membership. So that's like the report I sent you, where I do, I'm sure you kind of got the idea, super in-depth breakdown.
So good. So good.
Where it's like really digging into these things and doing the research and showing patterns and making connections. So that's what I do in my membership. And I have a free trial for that, a free 2-week trial. So that's swipe.co/invite.
Cool. Yeah. Everyone who's listening to this, check it out. Like I'm like, my mind is blown already just from like doing a little bit of like looking through it. So I can't wait to dive into it. But Mike, this has been really rad, man. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah. Thank you, man. It was great talking to you. It was awesome. Good luck with this project of yours.
Thanks, dude.